The glass walls of the Cole mansion trembled with the twins' screams. Toys flew across the marble floor like missiles. A maid in a blue uniform bolted toward the gate, purse in hand, tears in her eyes. "I'm done! I can't anymore!" she shouted, brushing past the guards. Upstairs, billionaire Raymond Cole stood frozen at the doorway of the nursery, his face lined with exhaustion. 2 5-year-olds, Liam and Leah, kicked, screamed, and tore pages from their storybooks. The last nanny had lasted barely 48 hours. Raymond's company, Cole Properties, was hosting investors that evening, but all he could hear was the echo of chaos behind the nursery door. His late wife's portrait stared down at him from the hallway, a reminder of the promise he'd made to keep their children safe and happy. Instead, every caregiver fled in fear or frustration. Something had to change. By noon, the mansion had fallen into silence, an uneasy, dangerous calm. Raymond sat in his office, tie loosened, head buried in his hands. The housekeeper, Madame Grace, stood nervously by the door. "Sir, there's another applicant waiting. She came from the mainland, says she's not afraid of hard work." Raymond's voice was dry. "They all say that." But when the door opened, the woman who entered didn't look like anyone who'd ever worked in his house. Her eyes were calm, steady, almost defiant. She was tall in her late 20s, her dark skin glowing under the chandelier light. She introduced herself simply. "My name is Mara." There was no desperation in her voice, only quiet conviction. Raymond leaned back, curious. "Do you know what you're walking into?" She nodded once. "Yes, sir. And I don't run from storms." Raymond studied her carefully. She wore no makeup, no jewellery, and carried a worn-out handbag that had clearly seen years of Lagos dust. Her shoes were plain flats, the kind sold in a shoddy market. "Why this job?" he asked. Mara hesitated. "Because children shouldn't grow up without peace, sir. And because I need this more than sleep." There was something in her tone, a mixture of sadness and strength that made even Madame Grace glance up. "You'll regret it," Raymond murmured. "Everyone does." But Mara didn't flinch. She only smiled faintly. "If they're children, they can be loved. And if they can be loved, they can change." Raymond sighed. He signed the paper without another word. As she walked out to meet the twins, he caught himself whispering a prayer, half out of hope, half out of fear. The nursery door opened again, but this time the storm didn't roar. It paused. The twins stared at her like 2 wild cats, sizing up a stranger. Leah clutched her doll. Liam threw a puzzle piece at Mara's leg. She didn't scold or flinch. She crouched to their height, gathered the pieces and began quietly building the puzzle on the floor. "You missed a corner," she said softly. The boy frowned, confused by her calmness. She looked up and added, "I can't finish without your help." Minutes turned into quiet. Leah knelt beside her, sliding another piece in. Within 10 minutes, the puzzle was whole. Raymond, watching secretly from the hallway, felt a strange tightness in his chest. The room that once echoed with screams now carried only the soft sound of children breathing in rhythm with their new maid. Something unseen had shifted. That night, the rain came down hard over Ikoyi. The city hummed with generators and thunder. Mara stood by the twins' door long after they'd fallen asleep, humming a Yoruba lullaby that her grandmother once sang on nights when lightning cracked the skies. Downstairs, Raymond poured himself a glass of whiskey, staring at the security monitors. On the screen, he saw Mara adjusting the twins' blanket, then whispering a prayer. He turned off the screen abruptly, unsettled. Something about her presence reminded him of the wife he'd buried 3 years ago, the same gentle firmness, the same refusal to give up. He wanted to believe she would last, but in a house haunted by grief, wealth, and secrets, nothing ever stayed peaceful for long. And before dawn, the twins' laughter would turn into screams once again. The first cry came at exactly 3:17 a.m. Mara was halfway through her first night in the servants' quarters when the sound cut through the silence like glass shattering. She didn't hesitate. Barefoot, she rushed upstairs. The twins' room door was ajar, the curtains flapped in the wind, rain tapping against the glass. Leah was sitting upright, trembling, her tiny fingers gripping the bedsheet. Liam was screaming, eyes wide open but unfocused. Night terrors, violent and sudden. Mara had seen this before in her younger brother years ago, back when their house in Ibadan shook each night from thunder and grief. She sat beside Liam, humming softly, her palm on his chest. "It's okay, baby. You're safe. You're safe." Slowly his breathing began to settle. When his tears finally stopped, Leah whispered, "Mama used to sing that song too." Mara froze, her eyes glistening. "Then maybe she taught it to me in a dream," she replied, and tucked them both in. Downstairs, the clock struck 4. Raymond hadn't slept either. He'd been pacing his study, glass in hand, staring at the flickering CCTV monitor. He watched the maid's silhouette move gently between the children's beds, smoothing their blankets with care that didn't seem rehearsed. For the first time in months, the twins slept through the rest of the night. But instead of relief, Raymond felt unease. He wasn't used to peace. It always came before a storm. When morning broke, sunlight washed over the mansion's white pillars, and the smell of fried plantain drifted from the kitchen. Raymond descended the stairs to find Leah seated neatly, hair braided, breakfast already served. Liam too was quiet, drawing, on a napkin. Madame Grace looked almost suspicious. "Sir," she whispered, "I don't know what that woman did, but it's like the house can breathe again." As the day stretched, Mara worked with precision and quiet grace. She spoke little but listened deeply. She joined the twins in their games, teaching them riddles in Yoruba and songs from her childhood. She never raised her voice, never demanded respect. She earned it. The household began to change around her. The guards joked more. The cook started playing music again. Yet Mara carried a private silence, a shadow in her eyes that deepened whenever the twins laughed too hard. In the evenings, she would sit outside on the back terrace, staring at the skyline, Lagos glittering in the distance like a city that had swallowed too many dreams. Raymond noticed. He often stood by his office window watching her from afar, wondering what kind of pain made a woman that strong. One evening, unable to help himself, he stepped outside. "You've done what no one else could," he said quietly. "What's your secret?" Mara smiled faintly. "Love, sir. But love costs something. Always." Her words lingered in his mind long after she left the terrace. That night, he opened the drawer of his desk and pulled out an old family photo, the twins, barely toddlers, on their mother's lap. His late wife, Lydia, had the same softness in her eyes that Mara carried, but Lydia's death had fractured everything. The official report said car accident, but Raymond knew better. The brakes hadn't failed by chance. A rival firm had been trying to destroy him, and the investigation was buried by money and fear. Since then, guilt had become his shadow. Looking at the picture, he whispered, "Maybe this is what you wanted me to find." Upstairs, Mara stood by the twins' bed again, unaware that her own past was about to collide with his. Because somewhere beyond Ikoyi's gates, a man in a black Prado was watching the house, and he knew exactly who Mara really was. The next morning, chaos returned, but in a different form. 2 security guards were dismissed for gossiping about the new maid. Raymond was furious when he overheard. "This is not a market square," he barked. Yet, even as he defended her, he felt the discomfort of realization. He was starting to care too much. When Mara entered the dining room later, he caught himself adjusting his tie. The twins giggled. "Daddy likes Miss Mara," Leah teased. Raymond turned red. Mara laughed it off, but her eyes flickered with worry. She wasn't here to fall for anyone. She had a mission, a promise made to someone who was no longer alive. That night she stood again by the children's door, listening to their soft breaths. Downstairs, headlights flared briefly at the gate. The Prado's engine idled for a moment, then vanished into the night. And though no one inside the mansion saw it, a small camera blinked red beneath the hedge. Someone was watching. The next few days moved quietly, almost deceptively so. The twins woke up earlier, smiled more, and even began calling Mara Auntie. The staff, once tense and cautious, now found themselves laughing in the corridors again. The mansion, once a cage of luxury and loneliness, felt alive. But Mara knew peace in rich homes never lasted long. Beneath every chandelier hid a shadow, and she'd learned to listen for it. On the third evening, while folding the twins' laundry, she found a silver locket tangled among Leah's dresses. Inside was a faded photo of a young woman, Lydia Cole, and a younger Mara, standing beside her in a nurse's uniform. Her heart froze. The twins must have found it in their late mother's old box. She hadn't seen that picture in years. Her secret was dangling in her hand now, fragile as glass. She'd been Lydia's caregiver before tragedy struck. Back then, Raymond was a man buried in work, and Lydia had been quietly battling depression after childbirth. Mara had seen the loneliness behind her smiles, had watched her slip deeper into sadness while the world saw only the billionaire's perfect wife. The night before Lydia's death, she'd called Mara in tears, saying she couldn't live in a house where love had become business. Then, the crash. Mara blamed herself for not answering that final call in time. She left Lagos afterward, vanishing into obscurity, until fate brought her back here through a job ad she hadn't even applied for. She'd come not for the salary but for redemption, to protect the twins she couldn't save their mother for. But now that Lockett had reopened a past she wasn't ready to face. That night, Raymond found her in the corridor, eyes swollen from tears she tried to hide. "You're not sleeping," he said softly. "Neither are you," she replied. They stood in silence for a moment, the hum of the generator filling the air. Then Raymond said something he hadn't said to anyone in 3 years. "They laugh again because of you." Mara looked down. "They laugh because they're loved, sir. That's all they ever needed." He hesitated, wanting to ask about the locket he'd seen in her hand earlier, but decided against it. He didn't want to disturb whatever fragile peace they'd built. But later that night, as he went through old security footage from the house archives, his eyes caught something strange. An image of Mara from years ago, captured at Lydia's birthday party. The realization hit like a blade. She hadn't just worked here before. She had been part of Lydia's final days. The next morning, Raymond's tone was cold again. The warmth from the previous nights had vanished. At breakfast, he barely spoke. Mara noticed immediately. "Did I do something wrong, sir?" she asked quietly. "Just focus on the children," he replied. The twins sensed the tension too. Their laughter faltered. By evening, the house was thick with silence once more. Mara went to the terrace, staring at the garden lights flickering in the rain. "You found out, didn't you?" she whispered to the night. In the distance, the black Prado returned, parking discreetly across the street. The man inside made a quick phone call. "She's inside," he said, "and she's closer to the children than before. Proceed with the plan." Lightning flashed over Ikoyi, illuminating his face, a scar cutting across his jaw. He wasn't a stranger. He was part of the very secret that killed Lydia Cole. Inside the mansion, Mara's instincts flared. She couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. She went to check the twins' room again, her steps soft, her heart heavy. Leah was asleep, her hand in her brother's. But as Mara adjusted their blankets, she saw something new. A folded note on the nightstand. The handwriting was unfamiliar. It read, "You should have stayed away. Some ghosts don't forgive." She froze, the paper trembling in her hand. She turned off the bedside lamp and sat in the dark, listening to the hum of the rain and the beat of her own heart. Downstairs, Raymond stared at his monitor again, seeing only static where the twins' camera feed should have been. And in that silence, both of them began to realize Peace had only been the calm before something much darker. The following morning brought a false calm, the kind that sits heavy in the air before a storm. The twins were cheerful, running through the garden in matching yellow overalls while Mara supervised them from the terrace. But her eyes kept darting to the gate. Every sound of a passing car made her pulse quicken. The note she'd found the night before still burned in her mind. She'd torn it up, but the message lingered. Some ghosts don't forgive. Who could have known she was here? She hadn't told anyone, not even her only surviving relative, her younger sister in Ibadan. Her hands trembled as she poured the children's juice. Behind her, Raymond watched quietly. He'd been up all night re-examining the security footage, trying to understand how a woman from his wife's past had found her way back into his home. "You knew Lydia," he finally said. Mara froze mid-pour. "Yes, sir," she whispered. "She was the kindest soul I ever met." Raymond's expression darkened. "Why didn't you tell me?" Mara looked up, her eyes soft but steady. "Because you would have sent me away before I had the chance to make things right." He stepped closer, voice low. "Make what right, exactly?" She hesitated, then said, "The night she died, she called me. I didn't answer. I've lived with that ever since." The room fell silent. Raymond's jaw tightened, grief and anger warring inside him. "You think I haven't lived with it too?" he said. "I've spent 3 years asking God why I wasn't the one in that car." The words cracked something between them. Two souls haunted by the same woman, standing in the same house built from pain. But before either could speak again, the twins' laughter outside turned into shrieks. They ran toward the door, shouting, "A man was taking pictures!" Raymond's eyes snapped wide. "Stay here," he ordered, storming toward the gate. The guards had seen nothing. Whoever it was had vanished, leaving only wet footprints on the marble tiles. Raymond cursed under his breath. "Strengthen surveillance," he barked. But Mara stood quietly by the doorway, staring at the ground where the footprints ended. The shoe prints were too familiar. Heavy, broad, slightly uneven. She knew that limp. Her heart dropped. "It can't be," she whispered. That limp belonged to Kunle, her former fiancé, the same man who once worked security for Lydia Cole's rival company, Crestline Holdings. He'd been the one who warned Mara to quit the mansion years ago, saying she was getting too close to the wrong people. She hadn't seen him since the night of Lydia's death. And if he was watching now, it meant someone from that old world still believed she knew more than she did. Suddenly, her reason for coming here, redemption, had turned into survival. That evening, rain fell again, harder than before. The twins slept early, exhausted from the fright. Raymond poured 2 cups of tea and joined Mara on the terrace. The storm glimmered against the city lights. "I owe you an apology," he said quietly, "for doubting your intentions." She smiled faintly, though her eyes betrayed fear. "You don't owe me anything, sir. We both lost her." He studied her, searching for something he couldn't name. "You're hiding something," he said finally. Mara looked at him, rain streaking down her face. "Would you believe me if I said I'm trying to protect your children?" He frowned. "From who?" She looked away, voice breaking. "From the same people who killed their mother." Lightning flashed, illuminating the truth in her eyes. Raymond's chest tightened. "You think it wasn't an accident?" he asked. Mara turned to him, whispering, "I don't think, sir. I know." Silence swallowed them. The thunder rolled like a warning drum across the sky. Raymond set his cup down slowly, realization dawning that everything he'd been told about Lydia's death might have been a lie. Mara took a deep breath. "Please trust me. Don't let the twins out of your sight for now." He nodded, his mind racing. For the first time, they were allies bound not by duty but by fear. Inside, the twins stirred in their sleep as the wind rattled the windows. A shadow passed across the nursery door, someone moving silently down the hallway. Downstairs, one of the monitors flickered again before going dark. The mansion, alive just days ago, had become a fortress under siege. Outside, the black Prado waited under a jacaranda tree, its engine off, its watcher patient. This was only the beginning. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share so others can follow this journey. Tell me in the comments, what would you have done if you were Mara, facing ghosts from the past while protecting the innocent? The storm lingered through dawn, leaving Lagos washed clean yet restless. The Cole mansion stood quiet under grey skies, but inside, tension simmered like an unspoken secret. Raymond hadn't slept. Every echo, every shadow on the wall pulled him back to Mara's words. The same people who killed their mother. He sat in his study staring at the old file marked Lydia Cole Accident Report. He'd buried it years ago under business and grief, but now he read every line again. The police report was too neat. No mechanical fault, no witnesses, no follow-up. He flipped through photos until one stopped him cold. A blurry frame from the crash site showing a man standing near the wreckage, face turned away. A faint scar on his jaw. The same scar the security camera had caught outside the gate days ago. His hands trembled as he whispered, "Who are you?" Mara was already awake, preparing breakfast for the twins. The air smelled of pancakes and butter, but her mind was elsewhere. She knew Kunle too well. He was loyal to money, not conscience. If he was back, then someone had paid him to find her, or worse, to silence her. She glanced at the twins who were giggling as Leah fed Liam syrup from a spoon. They had no idea their world was under siege. Her heart clenched. She'd failed to save their mother, but she wouldn't fail them. She needed to act fast, but without alarming Raymond. As she packed their lunchboxes, Madame Grace entered, wiping her hands on her apron. "Madame Mara," she said, using the title jokingly. "The driver said a man came to the gate this morning asking for you. Said he was an old friend." Mara froze. "What did you tell him?" "That you don't receive visitors," Grace replied. "He left a card." The card was plain, unmarked except for one thing, 3 numbers written in ink. 11:45. Mara's throat tightened. It wasn't a time, it was a code from years ago, one she and Kunle used while working with Lydia's foundation. 11:45 meant danger inside, move unseen. Panic surged, but she hid it well. She couldn't run again. It would only draw suspicion. She needed to uncover who was pulling Kunle's strings, and why now. Around noon, as Raymond left for his board meeting, she slipped into his study. She wasn't snooping for curiosity, but for survival. On the desk, the open accident file caught her eye. She scanned the photos and there he was, Kunle, standing beside the wreckage. A low gasp escaped her lips. The very man who had once sworn to protect her had been there that night. And she had no idea. The door creaked. Raymond's voice cut through the air, calm but cold. "You've been keeping a lot from me, haven't you?" Mara turned, startled. He closed the door behind him. "You said you wanted to protect my children," he continued. "From who, exactly? Your friends?" She stepped forward, trembling. "Sir, please listen to me. That man, Kunle, he worked for your competitors. He was involved in the cover-up after your wife's death. I left because I couldn't live with the guilt. But now they're back, and if they find out what Lydia told me before she died, they'll come for the children." Raymond's face shifted from anger to disbelief. "What did she tell you?" Mara hesitated, tears welling. "She said she discovered something in your company. Someone was laundering money through her charity accounts. The night she died, she was on her way to expose it." Raymond's world tilted. He staggered back, gripping the edge of his desk. "You're saying my wife was killed because of my company?" "Not by you," Mara said softly, "but by someone close to you." The thunder outside cracked like punctuation. For the first time, Raymond saw the web, his wife's death, Mara's silence, and the man in the Prado, all threads of one buried truth. "If what you're saying is real," he said hoarsely, Then I've been living with the enemy inside my own house. Mara nodded slowly. And the only reason I'm still here is because I need to end what Lydia started. They stared at each other, two lives tied by loss and purpose. Then, from upstairs, the twins' frightened voices shattered the moment. "Daddy! Auntie Mara! There's someone in our room!" They raced up the stairs. The nursery door was open, curtains billowing. A single toy spun on the floor. On the windowsill lay another note, written in the same sharp hand. "Next time, it won't be a warning." Rain hammered against the glass as Raymond burst into the twins' room, eyes wild, scanning every corner. The children clung to Mara's legs, trembling. "He was here," Leah cried. "He touched my doll." Raymond lifted the small pink toy from the floor. Its porcelain face was cracked, and tucked inside the tear in its dress was a small memory card. His stomach sank. This wasn't a warning, it was surveillance. Someone had been recording them. "Get them downstairs," he ordered, his voice hoarse. Mara ushered the twins to the living room, her mind spinning. Whoever had breached the mansion wasn't just a random intruder. They knew the children's routines, their favorite toys, even the blind spots in the security cameras. That meant only one thing. The betrayal was coming from within. Raymond stormed into the control room where the head of security, Tunde, sat nervously before a wall of screens. "How did someone enter my children's room?" Raymond barked. Tunde stammered. "Sir, the system didn't show any break-in. No one came through the gate." Raymond slammed his hand on the desk. "Then how do you explain this?" He tossed the cracked doll in front of him. Tunde froze. For a second his face betrayed something, a flicker of fear. "Sir, I'll investigate right away." But as he turned, Raymond's sharp eyes caught the glint of a silver keycard tucked halfway into Tunde's pocket, the same model used for the private service entrance. "Give me that," Raymond demanded. Tunde hesitated, then handed it over. The keycard was marked HARC PR 47, a restricted code reserved for executive visitors. "Where did you get this?" Raymond's voice dropped. "It was left in the security post," Tunde lied. Raymond's silence was deadly. "You have 1 hour to give me the truth before I call the police." Meanwhile, Mara sat with the twins, humming softly to calm them. Her voice was gentle, but her thoughts were racing. She knew Kunle's methods. He never worked alone. The intruder could have been one of many eyes planted in this house. When Raymond joined her again, his face was pale. "We've been compromised," he said. "Tunde's hiding something." Mara looked at him, her voice steady. "Sir, if they're inside, then you can't confront them openly. That's what they want. You need to make them think you're still blind." He studied her, half in awe of her composure. "You sound like you've done this before." She sighed. "You learn how to survive when people you trust turn into enemies." He sat beside her, watching the twins play quietly under the chandelier. "I don't understand you," he said softly. "You walk into chaos and somehow make it gentle." She smiled faintly. "Maybe chaos just listens when it's spoken to with love." That night, the mansion was too still. Raymond couldn't sleep. He stood by the nursery door watching the twins breathe peacefully under their covers, while Mara sat in a chair nearby, her eyes half closed but alert. "Do you ever rest?" he asked quietly. "Only when peace feels real," she replied. He exhaled. "It never does it?" Their eyes met in the dim light, two weary souls bound by a grief they didn't choose. In that moment, something unspoken passed between them, something that went beyond duty. But before either could speak, a sound cut through the silence, a muffled ringtone from the servants' quarters. Mara's body tensed. That ringtone, she knew it. The same tone Kunle used when they worked for Lydia. She rose instantly. "Stay with the children," she whispered, and darted down the hallway. Mara followed the sound to the laundry room, her bare feet silent against the marble. The phone was hidden behind a pile of uniforms, vibrating against the tiles. She picked it up. The screen flashed a message from an unknown number. "Midnight, back gate." alone. Her breath caught. It was him, Kunle. After all these years, he'd come out of the shadows. She deleted the message and placed the phone back carefully, then looked up at the CCTV corner. She could feel it watching her. "If this is what you want, Kunle," she whispered, "then we'll finish it your way." Upstairs, Raymond stood at the balcony watching the garden lights flicker. He didn't know Mara had made a decision that would change everything, that by midnight she would walk into the very trap she'd spent years running from. The mansion clock struck midnight. The rain had stopped, leaving the night heavy with mist and silence. Mara moved like a shadow through the hallway, her steps light but deliberate. The house slept, guards drowsing at their posts, the twins safely tucked beneath their blankets. Raymond lost in restless dreams. She wore a black shawl, blending into the darkness, and carried nothing but a small torch and the weight of everything she hadn't said. At the back gate, the jacaranda branches swayed gently. A figure stood beneath them, motionless. Kunle. Even after years apart, she recognized his stance, the slight limp, the squared shoulders, the way he pretended not to be dangerous until it was too late. "You shouldn't have come back," he said quietly, stepping into the dim light. His face had hardened with time, the scar on his jaw now deeper. Mara's voice didn't shake. "And you shouldn't have followed me." He laughed softly, a bitter sound. "Still brave, I see. Or just foolish?" She glared at him. "You were at the crash site that night." His eyes flickered, but his smile stayed. "I was following orders." "Whose orders?" she demanded. He stepped closer, his cologne mixing with the smell of wet earth. "You think this is about Lydia's death?" "No, Mara. It's bigger. That woman found out things that could have destroyed men far more powerful than Raymond Cole. She was supposed to hand over those files quietly, but she got emotional. You know how emotions get people killed." Mara's stomach turned. "And you helped them silence her?" His voice lowered. "I didn't kill her, but I didn't stop it either." For a moment his tone almost sounded regretful. "You disappeared. Smart move. But when you showed up here again, the people upstairs got nervous." She took a slow step back. "They think I have something." He nodded. "Do you?" "No," she whispered, "but I know enough to find it." That caught his attention. "Then you still have the access code?" She froze. "What code?" His smirk widened. "Lydia's private archive, the one she hid in her foundation's system before she died. You were her nurse, but also her witness. She told you where she stored it." Mara's heart pounded. She remembered now. The encrypted USB Lydia had slipped into her hand hours before the accident. She'd buried it deep inside an old sewing kit, never realizing what it contained. "If that drive still exists," Kunle continued, "you're the last obstacle between my employers and freedom." He leaned closer. "Give it to me and maybe they'll let you live." Mara stepped back, eyes burning. "You think I came here to beg? I came to finish what Lydia started." For a moment they just stared at each other, past and present colliding like thunder. Then, from the mansion, a beam of light cut through the darkness. Raymond's voice thundered, "Mara!" She turned in shock. He stood by the terrace, armed security behind him. Kunle's smirk vanished. "You brought him here?" he hissed. "No," she whispered. "He must have followed me." Raymond shouted again, "Get away from her!" Kunle's expression hardened. "Tell your boss this doesn't end here." He stepped backward into the mist, disappearing before the guards could react. Raymond ran to her side, grabbing her shoulders. "Are you out of your mind?" he shouted. "You could have been killed." Tears filled her eyes, but her voice was firm. "You wouldn't have believed me otherwise. Now you've seen it yourself." He stared at her, breath ragged. Who was he? "The man who knows why your wife died," she said, "and the man who won't stop until I'm dead too." They stood there in silence as the first call to prayer echoed faintly from the mainland. The dawn wind carried the scent of wet jacaranda petals. "You're not going anywhere alone again," Raymond said quietly. "You understand?" Mara nodded, but her eyes lingered on the shadows beyond the gate. She knew Kunle's threats weren't idle. He would return, and next time, he wouldn't come alone. She turned back toward the mansion, her heart heavy with dread. Somewhere in her old sewing kit lay a forgotten drive holding the key to everything, Lydia's final truth, the real faces behind her murder, and the reason no nanny had lasted in this house. The ghosts of this mansion weren't supernatural. They were men with power, and they were still watching. Morning light crept slowly through the Cole mansion, touching marble, glass, and grief. Raymond sat in silence at the edge of the twins' playroom, watching them draw rainbows with crayons. Their laughter sounded innocent, but he could feel the tension underneath, like a violin string stretched too tight. Mara stood nearby, her eyes fixed on the window where she'd last seen Kunle vanish into the mist. She had slept little, replaying every word he'd said. Lydia's hidden archive, the USB drive she'd buried years ago. Could that truly hold the proof of murder? Or was it another trap meant to lure her out? She turned to Raymond. We need to search Lydia's old things. If she hid something, it'll be there. He hesitated, torn between disbelief and the ache of wanting answers. Finally, he nodded. Her things are in the storage wing. We'll go after lunch. But the twins? I'll ask Madame Grace to watch them, Mara replied. Someone you still trust? Raymond's eyes flickered with doubt. I'm not sure I trust anyone anymore. The storage wing was a museum of ghosts. Lydia's. Dresses still hung neatly in garment bags. Her perfume lingered faintly in the air. Dust floated through streaks of sunlight like fragments of memory. Mara's hands trembled as she opened an old chest filled with baby clothes and photo albums. Beneath them, wrapped in a faded shawl, was the object she'd almost forgotten, a small wooden sewing kit. She lifted it gently. Her throat tightened. This was hers, she whispered. Raymond watched silently as she opened it. Inside, among needles and spools of thread, lay the old silver USB drive, still engraved with Lydia's initials, LC. She held it up, her voice breaking. She gave this to me the night before she died. I thought it was just sentimental. I was wrong. Raymond took it carefully, his fingers brushing hers. If this has what you think it does, he said, then everything changes. Neither of them noticed Madame Grace standing at the doorway, her face pale as marble, her hand trembling slightly. She had seen the drive. That night, Raymond called in his trusted IT specialist to decrypt the files. Mara stood beside him as lines of code filled the computer screen. Slowly, folders began to appear. Financial documents, offshore account logs, messages between executives. Then one folder marked Confidential, CPH. Raymond clicked it open, and the truth hit him like a storm. It contained signed letters, transactions, and hidden contracts implicating Cole Properties Holdings, his own company, in laundering money through Lydia's charity. But worse, there were memos linking Tunde, his security head, and Madame Grace, the housekeeper, to payments from Crestline Holdings, the rival firm. They were feeding information from inside this house, Mara whispered. Raymond's voice cracked. Grace. She's been here since Lydia and I got married. He leaned back, his face ashen. She was like family. The realization tore through him. Betrayal had been sleeping under his own roof. Mara placed a hand on his arm gently. Sir. Lydia knew. That's why she tried to leave that night. Suddenly, a crash echoed from the hallway. Raymond sprang up. The IT man shouted, "The system's been breached." The computer screen flickered, then went black. Someone had remotely wiped the files. Raymond cursed and ran toward the hall, but stopped cold. The front door was ajar and Madame Grace was gone. One of the guards shouted from outside, "A car just left the compound, sir." Mara's heart pounded. She took the drive. Raymond clenched his fists. No, she couldn't have. I still have it. He checked his pocket, but it was empty. The USB was gone. In that instant, they both understood. The housekeeper had been listening all along. "We have to get the children," Mara said urgently. They rushed upstairs. The twins were safe, asleep under their covers, but on the bedside table sat a single object that didn't belong there. A porcelain doll, perfectly, clean, its face unbroken. A message. They can reach anywhere. Raymond turned to Mara, whispering, "We're not just fighting ghosts anymore. We're fighting a network." As the mansion went into lockdown, Raymond sat in the dim light of his study, his world collapsing around him. Mara stood by the window watching the city's night glow. "This isn't just about Lydia," she said quietly. "This is about everything built on her silence." Raymond looked up at her, eyes heavy. "And you? Why risk your life for a family that isn't yours?" She smiled sadly. "Because once Lydia told me that love doesn't stop when someone dies. It just changes its direction. Maybe this is mine now." He stared at her for a long moment, then whispered, "I believe her spirit brought you back." Their eyes met in a silence thick with emotion, grief, and something unspoken, something that felt dangerously close to healing. But outside in the black Prado, Kunle was on the phone again. "Grace has the drive," he said. "She's meeting them tonight at the docks." The voice on the other end replied, calm and cold. "Make sure neither she nor the maid lives long enough to use it. If you've been following this story till now, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share with your friends. Tell me, what would you have done if you discovered betrayal inside your own home? And where in the world are you watching from right now?" The night was thick with fog, the kind that turned Lagos into a maze of ghosts and headlights. The Cole mansion was behind them now, a glowing fortress fading into the rain. Raymond gripped the steering wheel of his black Range Rover, his jaw tight with fury and fear. Beside him, Mara clutched her shawl, her mind racing through every possible scenario. Madame Grace had been with Lydia the day she died. Now she had the drive that could destroy everything. "Are you sure she's meeting them at the docks?" Raymond asked, his voice gravelly. Mara nodded. "Kunle won't let her leave Lagos alive. She's only valuable until she hands that drive over." The wipers swept across the windshield as they turned onto Wharf Road, where the scent of diesel and salt filled the air. The port loomed ahead. Silent ships, cranes towering like shadows, and lights flickering through the mist. "Stay in the car," Raymond said, but Mara was already opening the door. "If I stay here, we lose her." The dock was almost empty except for a line of parked trucks and a single container office with dim light seeping through its blinds. Mara crept closer, her heart pounding. Through a cracked window she saw Madame Grace sitting opposite Kunle, her face pale but defiant. "I did what you asked," Grace said, voice shaking. "Now pay me and let me go." Kunle leaned back, smirking. "You think you can blackmail people like them? You're lucky they're even letting you breathe." He took the drive from her, trembling hand, and slipped it into his jacket pocket. "What happens now?" she asked. His smile vanished. "Now? You disappear quietly." Grace's scream was swallowed by the sound of thunder. The gunshot that followed echoed across the water. Mara flinched, covering her mouth. She wanted to run, but before she could move, a hand gripped her arm. She spun. "Raymond." "We have to go," he hissed. "He's armed." But Mara's eyes burned. "She died trying to fix what she broke. I won't run this time." They crouched behind a stack of crates, watching Kunle's men load something into a black van. "He's leaving with it," Raymond whispered. Mara's eyes followed the small flash drive glinting in his hand. "We can't let him." Without warning, she bolted forward. "Mara!" Raymond hissed, but it was too late. She darted across the wet concrete, her footsteps drowned by rain. Kunle turned just as she slammed into him. They crashed to the ground, struggling in the mud. The drive slipped from his hand and skidded toward the edge of the dock. "You never learn," Kunle growled, pinning her down. "You're still fighting battles that don't belong to you." She spat blood, glaring up at him. "No, I'm fighting for the ones who can't." The sound of a gun cocking stopped him cold. Raymond stood a few feet away, drenched and furious, his pistol aimed squarely at Kunla's chest. "Let her go," he said, voice steady but lethal. Kunla hesitated, eyes flicking to the drive near the water. "You won't shoot me," he sneered. "You're not a killer." "Try me," Raymond said. The tension hung like a blade. Then Kunle lunged, not at Raymond, but at the drive. The shot cracked through the air. Kunle stumbled, falling backward. His blood mixed with the rain as the drive teetered on the edge, before sliding into the water with a quiet splash. Raymond's gun shook in his hand, smoke curling into the mist. Mara crawled to the edge, staring into the dark ripples. "It's gone," she whispered, voice breaking. Raymond knelt beside her. "We'll find another way," he said, but she shook her head. That was Lydia's voice, her proof. Her tears mingled with the rain. Behind them, the faint wail of police sirens grew closer. Raymond dropped the gun, trembling. "We have to go before they make this worse." Mara turned to him slowly. "You didn't kill the wrong man tonight. You killed the only link to the truth." They flared into the night as blue lights flashed over the dockyard. By dawn, the news was everywhere. Armed clash at Lagos. Dock leaves 2 dead. Suspected corporate spy among victims. Raymond's phone buzzed with messages from his board, his lawyers, his friends. But none of them knew the truth, that his empire had been built on rot, and now the cracks were open for the world to see. Back at the mansion, the twins ran into Mara's arms, unaware of the blood and betrayal that clung to her clothes. Raymond watched her from the doorway, the weight of guilt and something deeper pressing on his chest. "You risked everything," he said softly. "Why?" She looked up at him, eyes weary but resolute. "Because your children still deserve a father who can look them in the eye." For the first time in years, Raymond couldn't hold back his tears. But outside, on a rain-soaked street, a pair of gloved hands reached into the drain and pulled out something small, silver, and engraved with 2 letters, LC. Morning came heavy with dread and headlines. Lagos buzzed with rumours. Billionaire implicated in dockside shooting. Insider leaks from coal properties. Every news station looped grainy footage of flashing lights, police lines and whispers about corruption and cover-ups. Inside the mansion, the air was thick, tense, unspoken. Raymond sat at the dining table staring into untouched coffee. His empire was crumbling in real time. Every ring of his phone brought another crisis. Investors pulling out, journalists calling, board members demanding statements. Across from him, Mara watched quietly, still shaken but composed. "You need to rest," she said softly. "You haven't closed your eyes since last night." Raymond's voice was a whisper. "Rest for what? Everything I built is turning to dust." Mara leaned forward. Maybe that's what has to happen before something honest can stand again. He looked at her, weary but grateful. "You talk like Lydia used to." Her eyes softened. Maybe she never left. By noon, a new threat surfaced. A journalist named Chidi Okafor from the Daily Vanguard released a teaser video online. The thumbnail showed the silver USB drive held between 2 fingers, the same one thought lost at the docks. His voice, calm but sharp, filled the air. "Tonight, at 9 p.m., we release the truth behind Lydia Cole's death and the billion-dollar empire it exposes." Raymond's blood ran cold. How did he get it?" Mara stood frozen. "Someone must have retrieved it from the docks." Raymond rose sharply, pacing. "If that file leaks unfiltered, it'll destroy the company, and maybe us. Those people won't let the truth out alive." Mara shook her head. "You can't silence him. That's what got Lydia killed. The truth needs to come out, but safely." He looked at her, conflicted. "Safely. There's no safe way to tell the truth when the world profits from lies." They spent the afternoon in the study tracing possible leaks. The security chief's replacement confirmed that Madame Grace's bank accounts had been emptied hours before her death. Someone higher up had funded her. The trail pointed not to Crestline Holdings, as they'd assumed, but to one of Raymond's own directors, Mr. Adigan, his longtime partner and friend. "He's been on my board for 15 years, Raymond muttered, disbelief breaking into anger. "He helped me build Cole Properties." Mara looked at him quietly. "And he helped destroy your wife." Raymond gripped the desk so hard his knuckles whitened. "If Chidi exposes this without context, Adigan will frame me as the mastermind." Mara placed a hand on his arm. "Then we get to Chidi first, not to threaten him, to tell him the real story." He hesitated. "And if he doesn't listen?" Her voice was calm. "Then we show him what Lydia died protecting." That evening, the sky over Ikoyi burned gold with sunset. Mara dressed simply, wrapping a scarf over her hair, while Raymond changed into a plain shirt, the weight of guilt etched into his face. They drove in silence toward Chidi's office downtown, the city lights flickering like watchful eyes. "If this goes wrong," Raymond said quietly, "I'll take the fall. You'll protect the twins." Mara turned to him, her voice firm. "We're not dying for truth, we're living to finish it." He glanced at her, realizing how deeply she'd become woven into the fabric of his life. She wasn't just a maid anymore, she was the anchor holding his broken world steady. When they arrived, the lobby of the Daily Vanguard was empty except for a receptionist and the hum of servers upstairs. "Mr. Okafor is expecting you," the woman said, though her tone carried unease. As they stepped into the elevator, Mara whispered, "He's either brave or already compromised." The office door opened to a dimly lit room cluttered with files, camera gear, and the low hum of computers. Chidi stood by the window, calm and collected, the drive resting on the table beside a steaming cup of coffee. "You came," he said evenly. Raymond's tone was sharp. "You have no idea what danger you're in." Chidi's lips curled slightly. "On the contrary, Mr. Cole. I know exactly what kind of men your empire hides." Mara stepped forward. "Then you also know Lydia died trying to tell the truth." His eyes flickered, surprised. "You were her nurse," he said. "I read your name in her notes." He looked at Raymond. "She wrote everything down, every illegal account, every payoff, every threat. But what I didn't expect," he tapped the drive, "was to find your name among those who signed the cover-up." Raymond's voice broke. "I didn't know. I swear to you, I didn't know." Chidi studied him for a long moment. "Then prove it. Help me expose the right people." Before Raymond could answer, the lights flickered and went out. The hum of the servers died. Mara froze. "They're here." From outside came the faint crunch of boots on glass, the sound of suppressed rifles being cocked. Chidi's face went pale. "My God." "They traced the drive." Raymond grabbed him. "Do you have another exit?" "Back stairwell," Chidi whispered. "But it's narrow." Mara turned to both men, her voice steady but urgent. "Then move. Now." As they slipped into the corridor, gunfire erupted downstairs. The building shook. Sparks rained from shattered lights. Raymond shielded Mara with his arm as they ran down the emergency stairs, the USB drive clutched tightly in her hand. Behind them, shadows moved fast, men sent not to steal the truth but to bury it forever. The stairwell reeked of smoke and panic. The echo of gunfire followed them down, ricocheting off concrete walls. Mara led the way, her heartbeat matching each step. Raymond gripped Chidi's arm as they burst through the back exit of the Daily Vanguard building into a narrow alley slick with rain. "This way," Mara hissed, ducking under a corrugated shed roof as bullets shattered glass above. Chidi stumbled but held the drive close to his chest. "They'll kill us all," he gasped. "No," Mara said, eyes flashing, "not tonight." They sprinted into the street, blending into the chaos of Lagos nightlife, horns blaring, Danfo buses screeching, generators humming like restless beasts. Behind them, 2 black SUVs screeched around the corner. "Raymond!" Mara shouted. He didn't hesitate. He grabbed her hand and pulled her into the crowd just as the first SUV rammed into a parked taxi. People screamed. gunmen poured out, scanning faces. "Split up," Raymond ordered. "We'll draw them off." But Mara shook her head fiercely. "We started this together. We end it together." They dove into the maze of Balogan Market, where night traders were packing up their stalls. Mara led them down a narrow corridor between shuttered shops. The rain returned, pounding the tin roofs, masking their footsteps. Chidi clutched his camera bag tightly. "There's an internet cafe 2 streets down," he panted. "If I can upload the data to cloud storage, they can't erase it again." Raymond nodded. "Do it. We'll cover you." They turned into the cafe. A dim, humming room filled with flickering screens and the smell of burnt wiring. Chidi rushed to a terminal, plugging in the drive with shaking hands. Come on, he muttered. Mara watched the progress bar crawl slowly across the screen, decrypting 67%. Her pulse thudded in her ears. "Hurry!" But then, from outside, came the screech of tires. The black SUVs had found them again. "They're here," Raymond whispered. The cafe owner bolted the door, trembling. "Please! I have family!" "Hide," Mara told him calmly. "You'll live longer that way." The first bullet shattered the glass door. Raymond pulled Mara behind a counter as shards flew. Chidi ducked under a table, shielding the computer. "It's at 90%!" he shouted. Mara grabbed a fire extinguisher and hurled it toward the entrance. The white mist clouded the room, blinding the attackers for seconds that felt like lifetimes. Raymond fired one warning shot from the pistol he'd kept since the docks, just enough to buy time. The gunmen retreated briefly, regrouping outside. Chidi yelled, "Done!" The screen flashed. Upload complete. Cloud backup secured. Mara grabbed him by the arm. "Move!" They bolted through the back door into another alley, breathless, soaked, alive. The night exploded with thunder. Raymond guided them toward an old pedestrian bridge that crossed over the main road. But before they could reach it, headlights flared. Another SUV blocked their path. The driver's door opened. It wasn't just another mercenary. It was Adigon himself. Raymond froze. "You?" Adigon stepped out slowly, rain dripping from his tailored suit. "You should have stayed quiet, Ray. We could have settled this quietly. But no, you brought your maid into our business." His gaze shifted to Mara, cold and mocking. "You always had a savior complex, didn't you?" Raymond raised his gun. "You killed Lydia." Adigon smirked. "Killed? No. I just made sure the problem solved itself." His men stepped closer. "You think the police will believe your story now? You're already headline news. A billionaire? Gone rogue." Mara moved subtly to Raymond's side. "You'll never find peace," she said softly. "Not after what you've done." Adigon laughed. "Peace is for the poor." Then his smile faded. "Hand over the drive." Mara's eyes glinted. "It's already out there." The words hit him like thunder. "What?" Chidi lifted his phone, showing the live upload notification. "The world will see everything." Adigon's mask cracked. He lunged forward, shouting, "Shoot them!" Gunfire erupted in chaos. Raymond tackled Mara to the ground as Chidi sprinted toward the bridge, clutching his phone. 2 shots rang out. Chidi stumbled, falling hard, the phone skidding across wet pavement. Mara screamed. Raymond fired back, hitting one gunman in the leg. Sirens wailed in the distance, closer this time. Adigon turned, furious, but before he could reach the phone, Raymond was already there, blood on his sleeve, rage in his eyes. "You built this empire on her blood," he snarled. "Now you'll drown in it." He swung the gun like a hammer, knocking Adigon backward onto the wet asphalt. Police lights flooded the bridge as the last gunshot echoed into silence. By the time the officers surrounded the scene, Adigon was on his knees, hands raised, his empire collapsing around him. Hours later, in a dim hospital corridor, Mara sat beside Raymond, both covered in bandages and exhaustion. Chidi had survived, barely. The truth was everywhere now. The Daily Vanguard's story went viral. Lydia Cole's files expose corporate crime and murder conspiracy. Arrests began before dawn. Raymond stared at the ceiling. It's over, he murmured. Mara looked at him gently. No, it's just beginning. He turned to her, eyes full of gratitude and something deeper. You saved my children. You saved me. She smiled faintly. I didn't save you. I just reminded you who you were before all this. Outside, the rain had stopped. The first sunlight in weeks spilled across Lagos like redemption. The sun rose slow and forgiving over Lagos that morning, its golden light washing away the ghosts of the storm. News vans lined the street outside the Cole mansion, cameras flashing as police cars rolled past the gates. Inside, the once silent halls buzzed with voices again, not of fear but of closure. The twins ran across the living room, their laughter echoing through the marble corridors. Mara stood by the window watching them play, tears glimmering in her eyes. For the first time since she stepped into this house, she felt peace brushing at the edges of her heart. She'd survived storms before, but this one had been different, deeper, heavier. Behind her, Raymond entered quietly. His arm was still bandaged, his shirt wrinkled from sleepless nights. They're saying Adigun confessed, he said softly. Every document Lydia hid. They matched his signature. Mara turned, her eyes full of quiet relief. Then she finally rests. He nodded slowly. And so do I. His voice cracked slightly. The board wants me to step down. The investors want my resignation before the end of the week. Mara tilted her head. Will you? Raymond gave a faint, broken smile. Yes. I've spent half my life building something I didn't even recognize anymore. Maybe it's time I build something honest. He moved closer, his gaze steady. I couldn't have done any of this without you, Mara. She looked away, embarrassed. I was just a maid doing her job. He shook his head. No. You were the only one brave enough to tell me the truth. For a moment, silence hung between them. Gentle, unspoken, charged. Then a small voice interrupted it. Daddy! Leah shouted, running up to him with a crayon drawing. It's you and Auntie Mara, and us. We're all smiling. Raymond crouched, taking the paper carefully. His voice broke. That's the most beautiful thing I've seen in years. Later that afternoon, the mansion's garden filled with reporters' voices and faint applause as the police commissioner made a statement. The late Lydia Cole's evidence has led to the arrest of multiple executives from Cole Properties Holdings. We commend those who came forward. Raymond watched from the balcony, hands clasped behind his back. The cameras turned toward him, flashes bright as lightning, but this time he didn't hide. Everything you've read is true, he said calmly. I failed my wife, my family, and my employees. But I won't fail this city again. Cole Properties will be dissolved. Every stolen fund will return to the charity it came from. He paused, his eyes finding Mara standing quietly among the crowd below. And, if there's any good left in me, it's because someone reminded me what grace looks like when it has a face. The cameras clicked like applause. Mara looked down, humbled, her heart both heavy and light. That evening, as the sun bled into the lagoon, Mara packed her small suitcase. Her time there was done. She stood in the nursery, adjusting the twins' blankets one last time. Will you come back tomorrow? Liam asked sleepily. She smiled faintly. I'll come when you need me. Raymond appeared at the door, his expression unreadable. You're leaving. It wasn't a question. You don't need a maid anymore, she said quietly. You need to start over. With them. He stepped closer. And what about you? She looked out the window, the city glowing beneath the fading sky. I have a new story to live now. Lydia's truth is free. That's enough. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Raymond said softly, If peace ever becomes too quiet, you'll always have a place here. Her lips curved into a small, wistful smile. Peace doesn't stay quiet for long, sir. It just changes its tune. When she left the mansion that night, the city was alive with horns, laughter, and the rhythm of rain returning. She walked down the quiet road toward the bus stop, her worn shoes splashing in puddles. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from Chidi. "The world's listening. Lydia's story hit 1 million views. We did it." She stopped under a flickering streetlight, smiling through tears. "No," she whispered to herself. "Lydia did it." Behind her, the Cole mansion glowed softly in the distance. Inside, Raymond tucked the twins into bed and looked out the window toward the road where Mara had disappeared into the Lagos night. For the first time since Lydia's death, he felt the weight in his chest begin to lift. He whispered into the silence, "Thank you for bringing light back into this house." Outside, as dawn began to rise again, the city of Lagos breathed, a city that had seen greed, loss, and redemption, but still found ways to begin anew. Ibadan smelled like rain and red earth when Mara returned. The city wasn't as loud as Lagos, but it pulsed with something purer: humility, laughter, and the slow rhythm of ordinary life. The bus ride from Dugby to her old neighbourhood was long, but her heart was light. Children chased kites between the rusted rooftops. Traders called out prices of roasted corn and groundnuts. Everything felt alive in a way money could never buy. She stepped off at a familiar junction where a faded sign still read, Hope Street, the same street she'd left years ago in search of better pay, never realizing that fate would lead her through loss, betrayal, and redemption before bringing her back home. Her younger sister, Tola, ran to meet her, tears glistening in her eyes. "Mara, you came back." They embraced tightly. "I promised, didn't I?" Mara whispered. "And I always keep my promises." They walked through the narrow alley to their mother's old compound. The paint had peeled, and the gate leaned on one hinge. But to Mara, it felt like peace. Inside, she found children sitting on wooden benches under a mango tree, orphans from the neighbourhood, some barefoot, some laughing, all wide-eyed. Tola smiled shyly. "They come here after school. I teach them what I can." Mara knelt beside one little girl drawing in the dust. "What's your name?" she asked softly. "Amarachi," the child said proudly. "It means grace of God." Mara blinked away sudden tears. "That's a perfect name." She looked at Tola. "We can do more for them." Lydia once dreamed of building a place like this. A home for children who've seen too much. Tola frowned. "You don't mean—" Mara nodded. "Yes, the Lydia Grace Foundation. We'll build it right here with our hands if we have to." Tola's smile trembled, half pride, half disbelief. "You really never stop fighting, do you?" "Only when the story ends," Mara said quietly. "And mine hasn't." Days turned into weeks. Word spread quickly, first through neighbours, then churches, then local radio. Volunteers came with cement, books, old desks. Raymond sent supplies anonymously: uniforms, new roofing sheets, and computers for the classrooms. A note came with them, no signature, just a line written in neat handwriting. "For the light you gave us when we were drowning. R." Mara folded the note gently and tucked it into her Bible. Each morning she worked with the children, teaching them songs, reading stories, showing them how to plant vegetables in the backyard garden. Every laugh healed a piece of her that Lagos had broken. Yet sometimes, when the sun set behind the hills, she found herself staring at the road that led north, wondering if the twins still spoke about her, wondering if Raymond ever stood at the window at night, listening for the sound of rain. One afternoon, a sleek car stopped by the gate. The children ran to peek through the fence, giggling. Raymond stepped out, wearing simple clothes but carrying a presence that still turned heads. The twins followed, holding flowers. "Daddy said we're visiting Auntie Mara," Leah announced proudly. Mara froze, tears springing to her eyes as the children rushed into her arms. "You grew taller," she laughed. Raymond stood behind them, smiling quietly. "We were on our way to Abuja for meetings," he said. "But the twins insisted we stop here first." She laughed softly. "Of course they did." He looked around at the compound, walls freshly painted, children singing, laughter everywhere. "You did this," he said. "No," she replied. We did. All of us. Lydia, too. For a long moment neither spoke. The noise of the children filled the silence with life. That evening they sat beneath the mango tree, watching the kids chase fireflies. The air smelled of wet soil and smoke from roasted corn. Raymond turned to her quietly. You know, for years I thought wealth could build peace, but it was never money. It was people. Mara smiled gently. Peace isn't something you buy. It's something you build with truth. He nodded, his gaze softening. Then maybe it's time I start building again. This time, from the heart. The last light of day bathed them in gold as the twins dozed off nearby. For a while the world felt whole again. Mara whispered a short prayer under her breath, not for riches or recognition, but for strength to keep love alive in a world that forgets too easily. When night finally fell over Ibadan, the stars appeared clearer than they ever had in Lagos. Somewhere beyond the hills, thunder rumbled faintly, promising rain. But this time Mara wasn't afraid of the storm. She'd walked through worse and come out shining. 3 months later, the Lydia Grace Foundation was no longer just a quiet miracle in Ibadan. It had become a movement. Schools invited Mara to speak about hope and resilience. Churches raised donations. Even journalists who once hounded Raymond now called it a symbol of redemption. The laughter of children filled the compound daily, blending with the hum of life and the smell of roasted yam from roadside stalls. But as success grew, so did envy. One humid morning, Mara arrived to find 2 stern-looking government officials at the gate. Madam Mara Oladele, one asked, flashing an ID from the Ministry of Social Welfare. We've received reports that this foundation is operating without proper authorization. Her heart tightened. That can't be. We filed every document. The taller officer crossed his arms. Then you won't mind if we verify your records and funding sources, starting now. Their tone wasn't investigative. It was accusatory. Something was wrong. Inside, they combed through papers, questioning staff and frightening volunteers. Tola whispered nervously, someone tipped them off. They came too prepared. Mara's mind raced. The foundation's accounts were clean, but Raymond's anonymous donations might draw suspicion. When one officer held up the ledger, he frowned. These supplies, school kits, computers, uniforms, they were funded by a private donor with no declared source. Care to explain? Mara swallowed hard. A friend helped, the officer smirked. A billionaire friend? Her heart skipped. You'll need to appear at our Abuja office next week, he said coldly. Until then, all foundation activities are suspended. The children's laughter outside stopped. As the officials left, Mara sank into a chair, her hands trembling. Tola hugged her. They can't shut us down. But Mara's eyes filled with quiet fear. They can if the truth is twisted. They've done it before. That night, Raymond called. His voice was low, controlled but full of worry. I heard about the inspection. That wasn't random. Adigan's allies still have reach in government, Mara sighed. They're accusing us of laundering money, using your donations. Silence stretched between them. Then let me fix it, he said. I'll fly to Abuja and clear your name publicly. No, she said sharply. You've rebuilt your life. If you stand by me now, they'll twist the story, say you're covering your tracks. He hesitated. And if I stay silent? Her voice softened. Then maybe the truth will speak louder on its own. But after she hung up, she sat alone in the dark, staring at Lydia's old photograph framed above her desk. You told me love costs something, she whispered. But how much more must it take? 3 days later, the story broke. A tabloid headline screamed, Black Maid's Foundation, linked to Billionaire's money laundering scandal. The article painted her as Raymond's hidden mistress and accused her of using orphans to cleanse his name. Donations froze overnight. Volunteers stopped showing up. Even the landlord hinted that government agents were asking questions. Tola slammed the newspaper down, furious. They can't do this to you. But Mara only stared at the photo of the children on the wall. They already are. That evening she gathered the kids under the mango tree and spoke gently. You'll go home to your families for now. This isn't goodbye. It's just a pause. The children cried, clinging to her. When they were gone, she stood alone in the silence, fighting tears she didn't want anyone to see. But hundreds of kilometers away in Lagos, Raymond watched the same headline on TV and made his choice. The next morning, every major station carried his face again. I am Raymond Cole, he said at a live press conference, his tone firm and unapologetic. And I am the anonymous donor behind the Lydia Grace Foundation. The money was clean, the mission pure, and the woman you are slandering is the bravest person I've ever met. If you must investigate anyone, investigate me. Reporters shouted questions, flashbulbs blinding him, but his eyes never wavered. Lydia's name stands for truth, and so does Mara's. If you want to destroy goodness to protect corruption, then start with me. By sunset, the story had flipped. Hashtags like Kwa Stand With Mara trended across Nigeria. Donations resumed. The ministry withdrew its suspension notice. In Ibadan, Tola burst into tears as she read the updates aloud. He did it, Mara. He risked everything for you. But Mara only smiled quietly, wiping her eyes. He didn't do it for me, she said softly. He did it for the truth. That evening, as the children returned one by one, running and laughing again, she looked up at the sky glowing orange over the hills. Maybe, she whispered, this is what healing finally looks like. The grand reopening of the Lydia Grace Foundation was set for a Saturday morning, beneath a sky that seemed to bless the city itself. The mango trees swayed gently, the walls gleamed with fresh paint, and the laughter of children floated through the compound like music. Banners hung proudly. Truth, hope, home. Volunteers bustled about, arranging chairs and hanging balloons shaped like hearts and doves. Mara stood near the entrance in a simple cream dress, her scarf tied neatly, eyes glistening as she watched the life she'd almost lost come back brighter than ever. The air smelled of roasted corn, new books, and rain-soaked soil. It was peace, not loud or boastful, but full of purpose. Then the black SUV pulled up quietly by the gate. For a moment, everything stopped. Raymond stepped out, dressed simply but elegantly, the twins clutching his hands, each holding a bouquet of lilies. The crowd murmured as he approached, cameras clicking softly. He stopped in front of Mara, smiling with quiet pride. We brought a gift, he said. Leah handed her the flowers. Liam added shyly, we picked them ourselves. Mara knelt, her eyes full of tears. They're perfect, she whispered. When she stood, her gaze met Raymond's. You shouldn't have come, she said softly. The world hasn't forgiven you yet. He smiled faintly. Maybe not, but I didn't come for the world. His eyes drifted to the children running past them. I came for what's still worth saving. The ceremony began beneath the mango tree where it had all started. Chidi, now fully recovered, stood at the podium as master of ceremonies. Today, he began, we honor courage, the kind that tells the truth even when silence would be easier. The Lydia Grace Foundation exists because one woman refused to run from storms. Applause rippled through the crowd. Mara's heart swelled, her gaze moving from the audience to the smiling faces of the children. Then Chidi turned toward Raymond. And because one man chose redemption over reputation, Raymond lowered his head humbly as the applause grew louder. When Mara was invited to speak, the compound fell silent. She walked to the front, her voice calm but steady, carrying every scar and strength she'd earned. When I came back to Ibadan, I thought I was running from my past, she began. But I learned that sometimes the only way to heal is to build where it hurts. This foundation isn't mine alone. It belongs to every child who has ever felt unseen, Every woman who was told she was too small to make a difference. Every man brave enough to face his own truth. She paused, her eyes finding Raymond's in the crowd. It belongs to the woman who believed love could outlive death. Lydia Cole. The audience rose in quiet reverence. Her dream lives on here. And if she could see us now, Mara's voice trembled. I believe she'd say we did it. The crowd erupted in applause. Even the officials who once came to shut her down wiped at their eyes. After the ceremony, as the children sang a Yoruba hymn under the trees, Raymond found her by the garden bench. The sun filtered through the leaves, painting gold across her face. You spoke like her, he said quietly. Lydia. Mara smiled softly. I only borrowed her courage. He shook his head. No, you have your own. A gentle silence followed, filled only by the rustle of wind and children's laughter. I don't know what the future looks like, Raymond said finally, but I know I don't want to face it without you. Mara looked down, the words catching in her throat. I've spent so long surviving that I forgot what it means to be loved without fear. He took her hand, his voice low. Then let's both learn again. Together. Evening descended in hues of amber and lavender. The last guests left and the compound glowed softly under hanging lanterns. The twins ran barefoot through the courtyard chasing fireflies, their laughter echoing into the dusk. Mara sat beside Raymond beneath the mango tree, the same spot where the dream had been born. The world around them was quiet, content. Do you think Lydia would forgive us? He asked after a long pause. Mara smiled, eyes glistening. She already has. Every time the children laugh, that's her forgiveness echoing through this place. He nodded slowly, eyes misting. Then maybe this is what heaven feels like. Peace built from pain. As the night settled, the stars began to shimmer above Ibadan. The camera of life pulled back, revealing a house once broken, now full of song, a man once haunted, now free, and a woman once lost, now whole. Mara whispered a prayer into the night, the same one she used to murmur when the world felt too heavy. Let love be louder than loss. And for the first time since the storm began, it was. The end.